Welcome everyone to the next edition of the DFS Down Under Show. I'm your host here, Smatho 10, and as always, joining to me on my right hand side is the co-host of the Down Under Show, Big Hef. Good evening. How are you tonight?
Thanks, Smatho. It's starting to get into a bit of normality. We've had another look at these shorter games and footy, and that's obviously caused a bit of divide amongst the industry, but things are slowly getting back to normal, which is good. Might even be able to get out for a beer or two soon.
Oh, yes. Speaking of beers, how's that Colonial drop going for you?
Oh, I'm a huge fan of the Colonial. They're a bit of a shout out to our friends at Colonial. They're going through some tough times at the moment, but stay strong, fellas.
Yep.
And get yourself a slab of Colonial. Good stuff.
Yep, it could be a rarity item in the coming weeks. You never know. Mate, we're here today to talk about DFS AFL for the first two games of round 3. We'll go through the preview for these two games pretty shortly. But as always, for our original viewers of the show, it's great to be back doing Schmatho's 2 thumbs up. The thumbs up is always about highlighting the big winners over the weekend for the AFL DFS contest. And Hef, mate, we had a calibre of entrants here to go through. So let me get through some nominations who didn't quite get the 2 thumbs up. First of all, Fate Bender, who absolutely cleaned up Friday night, winning both Draftstars in an absolute smashing, and DraftKings, but not quite. Sheer Magic on Sunday had a sensational slate, winning DraftKings and Draftstars as well. Only off a few lineups as well. But no, he doesn't get my 2 thumbs up. Then there's They're Done, who just chucked in the old lazy 3 entries on the Thursday night to get a free ticket on the Friday and scooped up 10k on Draftstars. Nope. This UK winner, Will, who put this absolute random lineup into DraftKings as well. Mate, that was pretty special, but no, doesn't get the 2 thumbs up.
You better not give it to a poll.
Oh, no way. We wouldn't hear the end of it. But my 2 thumbs up this week goes to our inaugural DraftKings AFL winner, taking home $20,000 US, Tom Wing, also known as TJ12345 on DraftKings. I'll bring up his side here for you, Hef. Let's break down this particular lineup. Take it away. 20k in the kitty for this particular lineup.
First of all, geez, there's some big winners on that first weekend, and it's great to see all the guys who were just throwing a couple of lineups getting away with the big results. So you said that Sheer Magic had the seven or so lineups across 2 sites. They're done. Only had 3 lineups. Great to see. One thing I take from TJ's lineup here. Look at that 28 from Daniel Rioli.
That sticks out, doesn't it?
It does. And usually you'd think, I've got a bloke who got 28. I can't win. But we've seen this in a couple of lineups over the weekend, actually, where there was one guy who's had a pretty bad game, fantasy-wise, and the winner's been able to carry them to victory. So that's really encouraging. If you're like me at Smatho and you manage to find someone to have a complete shocker, you're not totally out of business. What do you think of his team there, Smatho?
Oh, look, it always when you look at teams at the end of the games, they just make sense. And you're thinking, why didn't I make that up? Dacos and Phillips were pretty, high-touted players, which are pretty good. Soldo played pretty well. Basher, your man Basher was, led all scorers there. Taylor Adams, they're your core pieces that most people would have had. And then just to see Shai Bolton with a 73, kind of just like, oh, goodness, okay, fair enough. You deserve to win that money by picking him.
Yeah, no, what I'm taking away from it is there's so many times when I know I build lineups and I'll get 7 or 8 guys. I'm thinking, I just love this lineup. And then I look at who's left to fill that 9th spot and I just totally hate it. And then I'll rip it all apart and I'll go again. All because I don't want to play that last guy. But it just proves if you got Rioli there with a 28, maybe sometimes if you love the rest of that lineup, just throwing in that random bloke at number 9, if he doesn't go as well as you would have hoped, you're not totally dead if the rest of your lineup is as good as what you think it is. And then obviously there's that little bonus that if you don't like him, and probably a lot of other people aren't going to like him either, he's going to be low owned. And if he actually pulls one from nowhere, that's going to give you a little heads up on the rest of the field. So I know I'm pretty guilty myself when I build my lineups and I sort of get to the end and think, no, I can't put that bloke in there. I've got to start again. It's pretty easy to play multiple lineups these days. Maybe just roll the dice.
Roll the dice. Now, Hef, I've got a new addition to the thumbs up this year. Roll the videotape. I was there today on the old Microsoft Paint. These characters back in the day with their 2 thumbs up. There's the Prince with his thumbs up. If they come back to me now, Tommy Wing, 2 thumbs up for you. I can't even get in the camera. Oh, here we go. There they are. There's my face. They're 2 thumbs up. Look, great nominations last week, but well done to you, Tom, for the first DK winner forever. So well done to you. Now, speaking of the sites, I want to touch on today's news that from Draftstars. First of all, they've been smashing it out of the park this last week with their new contest, which is the micro and the $5 fiver. They were so popular over the weekend in the AFL. They cleared guarantees just about every match of the AFL. And then today they announced that they introduced the casual restrictions on the micro and the mini. Essentially what that happens is that if you received a restriction from Draftstars, which are for the high-end clientele of the site, you won't be able to play these games anymore. So players such as myself, who was always loved a mini and loved a micro and the small stakes, this is right up my alley, and I'm sure it's a lot to other players on the site as well. Hef, what are your initial thoughts when you saw the news today from Draftstars?
It's been pretty well received, hasn't it? Definitely a lot of people up and about on social media. I'm amazed you haven't got an email yet, Smatho.
No.
After the performance you put in over the off-season, but obviously just they haven't released the criteria for restricting people, have they?
If you look deep enough on social media, there is a player called Chris Eddy 999 who is proudly...
Oh, he got restricted.
He posted his correspondence today, and he's highlighted that he's actually quite happy that he's restricted. So, you can actually see the criteria there. I'm not sure Draftstars will be happy that information came out, but it is a win for the industry, for the majority of the players on the site. Sure, if you get restricted, then you don't really have much business in the lower stakes, such as DraftKings. DraftKings have their restrictions on higher end players as well. So it's a great feature from Draftstars, and good on them for them. They've had a really good couple of weeks supporting the NRL and now AFL, so kudos goes to them.
That's a really good point, actually. Draftstars have been superb so far this season. There's been a few rumblings the last year or two that the range of contests hasn't been quite what people were looking for, but obviously they brought in the fiver. A lot of these contests smashed through their guarantee on the weekend just gone, especially the 5. We saw that 5K get up towards 7,000-8,000, and now they're restricting those smaller entries. They've got the 5, so you're not just playing the 15 if you do get restricted. You got the 5 there as well, and obviously you got the chance to go over to DraftKings who have a range of different contests that Draftstars don't offer themselves. So I'm struggling to think of a better time for DFS players in Australia than right now.
Now, speaking of DraftKings, obviously we've had our first week of AFL there, and we fielded a few questions from a lot of our viewers and obviously people on social media about how to go about DraftKings play. Now, obviously tonight we won't go through how to actually play on DraftKings, but is there anything that stuck out for you when you're playing AFL over the weekend that you should really highlight for the viewers?
It's quite similar to Draftstars in terms of salaries, and obviously the lineup construction's the same. And because the salaries you get half as much money and the players are roughly half the price as they are on Draftstars, I didn't find too many differences in trying to go across to DraftKings. I did notice that there's a few more options for single entry players. So if you like putting the one lineup in, DraftKings has a few more options for you there. Did you play there, Smatho?
Yes, I had a good time over there on the weekend.
Did you find much going on different that you maybe weren't ready for?
Yes, I wasn't ready for the mass multi-entry in the Minimax. I found that there was quite a bit of overlay quite late in contests, and what I was trying to do was into the mass entry first, and then try and pick a side for the single entry double ups at the end. Go do it the reverse order. Do your double entry or cash line up first, get them in what you want, and then concentrate on your mass multi entry after that, because it was a little bit fiddly in terms of entering or importing teams. And then, unlike Draftstars, where you can actually delete them and go again, once they're in DraftKings forever, unless you contest starts. So that's a good learning curve. So do your double up or your single ones up first, and then obviously if you want to enter more, then make some more later on. So that's probably
actually I got another trap. I got a trap as well, which got me on the NBA earlier in the year as well. I played a few head-to-heads and stuff on the weekend. There seemed to be a bit more volume in the head-to-heads than what we're used to on AFL anyway. For some reason, every time I'd set up some head-to-heads, I'd select my team, my contest would be reserved, but my team wasn't imported into those contests. So I had to then go back into my lineups and export that across all the head-to-head contests I set up. So just something to keep an eye on, because if I didn't double check, I could very easily have run some empty teams through those contests. I've done it before in NBA, so
fair
just
enough.
Trap for young players.
Yeah, so if you got any tips or any questions at all, make sure you head up to the DFR socials on Facebook and on Twitter at Rankings DFS. Drop us a line, and obviously we can get onto DraftKings Australia to give some guidance in terms of some tips and tricks as well. Obviously, you can also search out US content as well. Also, they've been doing it for years and years now. So we can also point you in the right direction, wherever it's lineup construction, etc. Hit us up. Hef, let's get into the games then. We've got two games to cover, the Thursday and Friday night. And we're going to start here with Hawthorn versus Richmond on Thursday night at the G. Hawthorn are currently $2.95 and the Tigers are warm favourites at $1.40. The spread's currently 19.5. And the total over-under is 134.5. As for these fantasy contests, it's $100,000 from Draftstars for a $15 entry. Also, we talked about the Fiver, which is $7,000 pool, which is the biggest they've got. 4K Mini, which is also huge, and the 3K Micro as well. For DraftKings, they've also posted their $60,000 US blinder, with $20,000 to first. And if I just go back to Draftstars, I've noticed today there's a bit of tweaking in the payout structure as well. So you might want to check that out if you're going to enter in the main GPP there. In the team news, for the Hawks, Sean Burgoyne is lucky to play after giving Danger the old schling into the ground. Tommy Mitchell's carrying a sore shoulder as well, so he should play, but you never know. And Jaeger O'Meara should be in the side after clearing training today after his busted face. For the Tigers, only Josh Caddy, who was out last week, could be back in for the Tigers on Thursday evening. Now, small sample size is the theme tonight. We've got through 2 rounds. I've already got some little stats here for you, Hef. For the Hawks, 15th in handballs, 15th in marks, and 13 in kicks in the league. So low disposal there. And for the Tigers, they're actually 14th in the league for handballs, 14 for kicks, and 13 for marks. So this could be a bit of a grind fantasy point-wise. Let's start with the rucks, as always. And I've got Segler up against Soldo, who did a great job against Grundy. Big boy still hanging about there in the back line, but I don't think he's fantasy relevant anymore. So who are you leaning in this ruck division for this match?
I've been really impressed by Ivan Soldo, to be honest. Just went toe-to-toe. Grundy had a little niggle and stuff last week, but now that he's been released, Big Ivan, he doesn't have Nankervis. He seems like a guy who's going to thrive on playing a ton of time in the ruck. There's not much difference between the two main guys here. He's only $600 cheaper than Segler, who is also finally been given the keys to the ruck, and he was quite good down there at the Cattery against Reece Stanley, but that's not always the hardest thing to do, go down against Reece Stanley, even though we did talk him up last year after he ripped apart Max Gawn and then made me look totally stupid. I'm leaning to Soldo. McAvoy's down to low 8,000s. There's going to be a game where McAvoy playing down back is going to be the ruck play. I don't know when it's going to be. I don't necessarily think it's going to be this time, but it's going to happen. So I'm not totally writing McAvoy off, because especially if it helps build your lineups. But he's still only a couple of grand cheaper, so it's not getting to that stage yet. But it's going to happen one day.
I mean, who's his matchup? Is it going to be Tom Lynch? Is it going to be Rewalt? Like, surely not.
Well, yeah, that's a good point. They're very agile, aren't they? Richmond up forward. I assume maybe they send him to Lynch and send Frost over to Rewalt. But was it Frost on Hawkins last week? He did a really good job. So yeah. Might they drop Big Boy?
Well,
might they just throw him into the ruck? Oh, wow.
All right,
yeah, quick questions.
Quick question before we move on to midfield. Is the double ruck stack in play with Segler and Soldo then?
Oh, yeah, I can see that. Actually, I forgot Segler was a forward as well. I could definitely see a double ruck stack. We know Richmond are really strong defensively, and we spoke last week about Hawthorn being quite good at restricting opposition forwards, and they did a really good job on a number of those Geelong forwards, despite getting whooped like they were. So yeah, that's in play.
Yep, I like it. Now Hawthorn only scored just over 1,000 points for the whole team, 1,044 fantasy points last week. With Mitchell being sore and Liam Shields doing nothing last week, will we lose? I reckon Mitchell will lose plenty of ownership, at that high 15k price. Contrarian time to strike on the Hawks, though.
Wow.
I mean, Ricky Henderson today just dropped down to 10k.
Yeah, I did see that with Henderson. I drafted him in a keeper league this season, and he's been horrendous. But down the tip's not his go, Ricky Henderson. And the MCG, that is his go. So down to 10,000, I think he's definitely a GPP play. He's just got the upside there. Jaeger coming back sort of changes up the dynamic of Hawthorn's midfield. I've got to say, I hate hearing when guys are carrying niggles. It totally does my head in. Like, what do you do with Mitchell now? He's 15,000. He didn't have that much attention did he, against Geelong? I know they said Guthrie was going with him for a bit. He just didn't look right at all to me, Mitchell. It's something I haven't made my mind up yet, I'll be honest on. What are your thoughts? Yeah,
look, it was hard when the rest of the team didn't actually score much fantasy output either. When your best players in the team are scoring 70, it's hard to get a gauge thinking, was it just a poor team effort, or is this going to be a trend moving forward? You've got to expect these lower scores from a team. Look, Jaeger coming back in is going to probably spread the load out around. It's going to be hard to trust people like Warpool now, or Shields, or even Henderson and stuff like that. But you can't ignore their price point, especially against the Tigers. If it was someone like, I don't know, Brisbane or something like that, you can safely ignore. But Richmond, who are a fantasy pit, it's hard. It's hard. This one's gonna be hard.
Yeah, so there's another way you can look at it, and maybe getting Jaeger back is going to help everyone. We usually say, there's not enough to go around, but they couldn't get the ball to spread it around against Geelong. And maybe with Jaeger back in the midfield, we know that Richmond don't generally run anyone. Like Mitchell, they're just going to let Mitchell go. They back themselves, Richmond, to beat them the other way around. We saw Collingwood have a number of tons through the midfield against them last week. So if, I'm probably looking to target Hawthorn mids here rather than the Richmond mids, to be honest.
In the defence, we've got Basher Hooley now at 15,670, the most expensive player on the slate. Will you be doing anything possible to get to him?
Look, I don't think I will. I think I'll be trading down a bit in the defenders. It seems so much to pay for Basher Hooley, doesn't it? 15,500. I love Basher, but Hawthorn do give up a heap of points to back, so he's not a fade for me by any stretch, but it didn't come up off last week. I played Blixarves against Hawthorn. Looking back, I would have been much better off playing Harry Taylor. So the thinking was all right, but just the execution probably wasn't. So you look at guys like Asprey and Dylan Grimes, do they come into play here at a cheaper price point? You've got to save money somewhere, and these are two teams which are quite difficult to save money. There's not an obvious amount of young fellas coming through, especially not with Richmond. You end up looking at guys like Rioli and just trying to roll the dice on them, and all these cheap backline guys. But we've said before that Hawthorn's a really good matchup for a couple of these cheap backline guys to stand up. So I'm going to be looking in that direction.
Yeah, I'm looking back at Sean Burgoyne again at 9,300. I think he's a good, reliable, safe play there. Nick Vlosten at 11.2. He was only 5% owned last week. So that's something you can keep in mind as well. But I reckon a lot will get down to even Liam Baker, 7,900. I think people will just pay down for that and take his 40 and move on.
So he does have a ceiling in theory, Liam Baker. We've seen him. He might have even turned up a couple of times last year. But when you've got Hooley and Short in that backline with him, it just seems like there's not enough ball to go around. Mm-hmm. From the Hawks side, we're still only having to pay $10,000 for James Sicily. That's never a bad GPP play when he only costs $10,000.
Excellent. Let's touch on the forwards quite quickly. We've already mentioned about Tommy Lynch and Rewilder. It could be in a good spot here with over 3-goal spread. Is there anyone there? Maybe the small fleet, Castagnas, those kind of types, or are we going to stick to the bread and butter key forwards?
Yeah, they're both very hard teams to score against for the forwards. Wingard let us down a bit last week, but he's 13,000, so he's not cheap by any stretch either. There's a guy called Oliver Hanrahan who's 7,900. He's a cheapie that I think has got plenty of ability, and sometimes Richmond don't pay too much attention to these smaller fellas running around giving possessions. They tend to swarm back and hold things out at the back. So maybe he's a cheaper guy that we can use who's not going to be overly popular, and we'll be able to bow up and get a little 70 or something for us.
Only 14% selected last week for 40 points, 64 points in round one. So, yeah, I like it.
Yeah, if you could get your 64 points at under 8,000, you'd be laughing.
Yeah. As you said, if you're struggling to find key forwards, you can always go that double ruck play and just have to think about one other there for you. So it's going to be an interesting game. Yeah, Hawthorn. Look like Hawthorn are going to be popular fantasy-wise and because of their price points, pretty much, in summary. Right, let's move on to Friday night footy, and this time we've got the Western Bulldogs and the Greater Western Sydney Giants. Currently, the Bulldogs are $2.35 outsiders, with the Giants at $1.60 favourite. Current spread's 9.5, and the total's at 137.5. For Draftstars, another $100,000 contest. I've done.
Is this a record? Is this the first time we've had two in the 1 week?
Yep, back to back 100, and I've done the sums already. Over $500,000 worth of AFL pools alone just for this weekend.
Wow,
it's like.
And the thing I love about these 100,000 pools, they haven't gone to that $20 entry figure to get there. They're stayed at the 15, and yeah, I'm just loving what Draftstars is doing at the moment, and I'm loving the fact that they get rewarded for it with great support from the DFS community.
Oh, look! Everyone held their breath last week for 120 for Thursday night, and it got there. It was amazing. It's like we all talk about all this growth in the community. You know, now we're starting to see the hard yards that these sites are putting in. They're starting to get great value for their competition. So. DraftKings haven't released their contest as yet, so keep an eye out there from them. Hopefully, throughout Wednesday. Hopefully, in team news, not much really kicking about for the Bulldogs. There's a couple of injury scares they've gone through. The Giants are actually pretty healthy. There's hardly any injuries on for them as well. So just make sure you look at teams on Thursday night for that. My small sample fact for tonight, Hef: Giants are last in the league for handballs, 16 for kicks, and 17 for marks. So they're actually worse than Hawthorn and Richmond combined there. Bulldogs are 17th for kicks, but they're actually second in handballs. All right. So these two teams that you think, great fantasy scoring teams, are actually going pretty crap through 2 rounds. Like the Giants have only been scoring 1,050 on average for their first 2 games. So and that's including a win over Geelong. Both teams are coming off losses. We all got burnt by Bevo on Sunday. Jack McCraig, etc. Played out of position. Everyone's doing their nut, thinking they're going to win their season-long weekly comps, and then here's McRae just doing nothing. So, being DFS, as I said, we can back the truck up. Do we go back to Jack McRae?
How sick are people going to be? They were the two popular options on Sunday, GWS and the Bulldogs, and there's going to be that many DFS players that just hate their guts because they let them down on Sunday, and now they've got to play all of them on Friday night. There's no team news yet for the Bulldogs. I dare say there's going to be plenty of team news for the Bulldogs come Thursday night. Luke Beveridge is under siege from the fantasy community. Everyone's just turned on him big time, and with good reason. Fancy playing McRae. When do we get Lockie Hunter back? Is he coming back?
3 week suspension. So no, we still
3 weeks.
So
do they move McRae out of that wing again?
Just put him in the middle for a centre bounce, and you can get a handball and a kick, and then you'd be happy. But no, it's not happening.
So this is a really interesting point. He's 16,000 still, Jack McRae. So at first glance, you think, no, you can't have him. How could you have him? If you take the punt and he's quite lowly owned at that big price, and Beveridge says, okay, we've just been whopped by 40 points by St Kilda, let's get serious, and in you go Jack McRae. We all know what he's capable of. Is that an opportunity there? Quite possibly.
Could possibly. Let's go back to the rucks, though. This intriguing battle between Tim English and Sauce Jacobs. Again, they're around that same price point we've got here, 11K, 10K for them. Look, I was pretty high on Tim English last week. I thought he'll get a few cheapies from St Kilda, but he got towed up by Marshall and Ryder. Jacobs is going okay. Obviously, he got the run around last week too. Do we just trust Jacobs to get it done, or do we take a flyer on English?
Well, this is the not there yet versus the well past where he was. Tim English, we're all waiting for him to take over and turn into that Dean Cox style ruck that everyone thinks he's going to turn into. He's not there yet. Sam Jacobs.
Goldie tearing him apart last week.
He absolutely ripped him to pieces. Goldie didn't even have to come off. He just said, "No, I'm just having too much fun out here running this old bloke around. Just leave me on here."
I'm good.
And Jacobs, when he was at Adelaide that last season, before he got injured, he was looking shocking, which sort of got glossed over, and then he was okay in round one. But I would love there to be any other option to play in the rucks this week, and there isn't. I'm going to lean to English, but in reality, I'll probably just split them.
Yep, you have to split them. There's pros and cons, and there's not many pros, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, maybe Jacobs should be able to monster English, so he's not going to be able to catch up to him. But once they're together in the middle of the ground, the hit outs is going to suit Jacobs. But look, I reckon I'll be looking to try and come up with something at other positions and just split these guys and not spend too much time on it. Whoever fits my lineup better is who I'll be playing.
Now, tagger alert, as always with a Giants game. And Matt DeBoer has another target this week, and we believe it's going to be Marcus Bontempelli. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, well, something to think about for the rest of the season is that DeBoer went to Cunnington, which I would send him to Higgins every day of the week. If I was playing North Melbourne, they sent him to Cunnington. Maybe that's a little insight for the rest of the year that they're going to keep sending him to that inside guy. Obviously, Higgins got a hold of him in the second quarter and they moved him over to Higgins. So they will move DeBoer if necessary, but Bontempelli's their main inside guy and he's their best player. So it seems like a no-brainer, doesn't it?
It does a no-brainer. So therefore, the ownership will now pile onto Josh Dunkley and Bailey Smith as well at 12,300. Seems to be looks like a very popular play. And then Lin Jong, who was the chalky, was old chalker who came off last week. 8,000. Is that little, I think that's still pretty good price. for Lin John, or do we expect a bit of regression here, second game up?
Well, GWS are notoriously hard to score against through the middle of the ground, but North Melbourne didn't have too many issues doing it last week. He's going to be very popular, Jong, just because he's got that 63 against his 8,000. He looks far too cheap. But there is some other guys around that price. So Ed Richards, they gave a bit of time through the midfield for, and he's never been a fantasy player and got 60-odd. So he's a bit of a pivot from Lin Jong if you're that way inclined. Or if you've totally spat it with the Bulldogs and Beveridge and just the whole charade, like those guys, Ed Richards could be straight out of the midfield this week. Maybe you go over to GWS and this kid, Jai Caldwell, who had really big raps last year but had a few injuries. He had 54 against North Melbourne. He's similarly priced. I could very easily see him outscoring both Jong and Richards. And, so he's definitely in play for me, Caldwell, when I'm talking cheap midfielders.
Now let's look at the defence. And obviously, it's not real great options back here. Zach Williams is 13,990. I think that's just way too much for his fantasy output through 2 games. Look, it is a small sample size. It is only 16-minute quarters, but I think you've got to get that mindset thinking, okay, what is value for a player, especially for this game? Is there anyone here that you kind of want to lock in and move on?
Look, I think there's a couple of obvious cheaper guys that you probably want to have a fair bit of. Bailey Williams seems to have bounced back this season. A 57 and a 67, which isn't too bad in this Corona times. Still only around the $8,000 mark. There's upside for him. I think he's still a bit cheaper than what he should be, so he's in play. And there's a really cheap guy, Isaac Cumming, 6,000 he is, and he's had 2 games for a 38 and a 36, and he burnt people last year as well. But he's a guy who has shown the ability to score a lot of points, albeit in the NEFL. But even if he's only getting you 36 of that 6K, the six times your salary on Draftstars isn't too bad with the shorter quarters. And there's going to be a game where he pops up and he gets 50 or 60. And for that reason, I think he's an easy guy to play, especially in a game where finding cheap guys isn't too easy. I'm just going to end up rolling the dice a lot on Isaac Cumming again, I think.
Yep, good salary saver there. And finally, let's look at the forwards where Toby Green is not only now forward available now, he's not through the midfield. You've got blokes like Whitfield and Cameron, Finlayson, who can bob up for a few goals if he gets quite hot at 8,000. Bulldogs options are looking pretty sparse down here with only Sam Lloyd at 9.8, the highest Bulldogs player. Are we going to get a couple of darts and just throw them out and see where they land, or do you have a little sneaky for us?
Well, I'm pretty keen on Jeremy Cameron, actually. We know the Bulldogs have been notoriously susceptible to the big forwards, and Cameron, he's had a bit of a slow start to the year, a couple of scores 50 and below, but he did have a big 120 against the Bulldogs in the elimination final last year. And, I think he's very, very reasonably priced around that $11,000 mark. So if I'm spending up there, I'm happy to go with Cameron. Whitfield's come down in price to 14,000. People are starting to get a little bit sick of him. There's going to be, obviously, we know how big a ceiling he's got, Whitfield, so he's always in GPP calculations. Toby Green's disappointed as well. I don't really like playing Toby Green up around 13,000 though when they pretty much have the full complement of midfielders, GWS, because he doesn't seem to get as much time through the middle as when a couple of those guys are injured. So I'm very keen to play Cameron, and I'd prefer to go with Whitfield over Green.
If Toby McLean gets selected, which there's been some calls for him to come. No. Good.
What's that clip going around about the guy asked, does he want to stay home with the kids or B? And he says B. That's what I'm like. Toby McLean. I'm not playing Toby McLean. We know what Toby McLean's like up forward, and he's no good. He's about as good as your mullet's going at the moment. So when there's not enough room in the midfield to play Jack McRae, there's no chance in the world Toby McLean's getting in there. So I'm not having any Toby McLean until we see otherwise.
Very strong hot take there from Hef. All right, well that's the two games. They're going to be it's a bit of a grind, as we said earlier, these two games, but $100,000 at each contest from Draftstars and $60K on the Thursday from DraftKings are there to be taken down. Join us next week, Hef, for another edition of the DFR Down Under show, brought to you by Daily Fantasy Rankings. Make sure you get to dailyfantasyrankings.com.au for all the free tools, the previews from Jesse. Jesse's going pretty well already this year. He's already he's been screenshotting his work as well from the fantasy sites, which is a bit annoying already. At Rankings DFS is our Twitter handle. Also on Facebook. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. As always, we've got some more work coming up throughout the season for all your DFS needs. Big Hef, thanks for joining on the show tonight, mate.
Thanks, mate. Good luck to everyone this week.
Thank you, and we'll catch you next time on the show. Good luck.
Cheers.